Welcome to the Corner House Collective podcast, sponsored by Danny Hardaker Video and Corner House Recording Studio. Today I've got three brilliant guests. We've got another one coming along. First of all, we have Shanaz Gulzar. How are you doing, Shanaz?
I'm good, thank you.
Good.
It's sunny today, so that's good.
The sun is out a little bit, yes. I'm using it as natural light today, so that's good. So you're from Adept, like an arts organisation?
It's an artist co-practice between myself and Steve Manthorpe, but I work as an artist and a producer. So I work in Manchester with Manchester International Festival as an artist with Adept, but also as an artist with a cross art form practice. Many hats, so I am always stimulated and never bored.
Brilliant, that's it. And so our question of the month that we're asking all the guests, if everything went back to normal tomorrow, if the lockdown ended, would everything that's gone on and the pandemic, the way it's turned out, has it changed the way that you work, or are you pretty much the same?
Yeah, I think it has. I mean, the thing is, I think any kind of sort of significant transformation can happen. I think it's changed the way I think about things. I don't think it's necessarily changed the way I work. I would like to think that it has, but I don't think I'm going to know until we come out of it. No,
that's true. That's definitely true. Have to wait and see, don't we? Okay, my other guest as well. I'm really pleased to have Nick Toczek on. Brilliant to have you. How are you doing, Nick?
I'm fine.
Good.
And yeah, the sun's out, so when this thing's finished, I've got to wash a load of washing, which is actually going to hang out.
That is a novelty in this past week. I'm going to go do the same, I think. I'm quite excited about it.
Well, I was going to say it's nice for my washing that it can hang out when we can't.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, Nick, we've got you on in the kind of capacity of a poet, but we've got loads of things to talk to you about because you're a prolific promoter from back in the day, if you like, in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
And you were also a DJ on BCB?
Yep.
And so we've got plenty to talk about. But same question to you as well. Has the pandemic changed the way that you approach your work? You know, is it different, or is it pretty much the same?
Totally different. I was working in schools and touring around the world. I've got loads of stuff booked. All that's gone. It doesn't look like it'll be back until next year. I've been posting a poem every single day, keeping a kind of poetic diary of the pandemic, and really unexpectedly, loads of people are setting them to music. They've been published in a whole load of things. So although I started it just to keep me busy, actually it's made me very busy.
It's amazing. I think you've got to seize the opportunity of whatever life presents you in general, I suppose, really, haven't you? But,
absolutely.
And it's been.
Also, I can't depend on going back into schools. At the moment, any schools that are taking guests are only doing it if they're not visiting other schools. And I tour schools for a living. So I don't think that that's going to come back for quite a while.
I didn't know that. So if you're going into a school, you could basically confine to that school.
Yeah.
Ah.
They don't want people. Same as staff going into hospitals and care centres and that sort of thing. They don't want you moving from one place to another and perhaps carrying it.
What were you saying, Shanaz? Sorry.
I was just thinking about your question about has this changed the way you work. I would think that actually there's an opportunity for live streaming Nick into schools, even if you can't make it. That's the way.
I did that just before the pandemic. I got asked to do some stuff in a school in Saudi Arabia.
Wow.
And they couldn't afford to take me over there, but they asked whether I'd do a live performance. And I ended up doing about 3-4 live performances to kids in the school. It was just brilliant. Extraordinary.
That sounds great. Obviously, there's a big difference between being on a screen in your living room and interacting with an audience, or even, just chatting to other people, isn't it? I mean, this is something that I think the live music world is coming to grips with the concept of, a band performing and there being no audience. Or there being an audience, but them not being there. And, how do you kind of, do you find that holds you back a little bit when you're not getting that immediate reaction, Nick?
It's different. I mean, it was weird with the one in Saudi because there was a time delay. And so all these little kids watching me perform, I was doing puppetry and magic tricks and poems and stories and all sorts. And there was this delay in the response, and I had to ignore the delay and just assume they were enjoying it. And carry on.
Did they like it? Did they like it? Did they like... Oh, good, they're clapping. Okay, that's good, yeah.
By the time they were clapping, I'd already started the next piece, so it was weird. It was like they were interrupting me.
Yeah. Okay, so we've sort of settled into doing this at the beginning of each podcast, where I guess it's a news thing, really, sort of a roundup of what's been going on in the news and whatnot. So I'm going to whip through a few things that I've kind of noted down, and if there's anything you want to talk about too. So Latitude, which is a festival in Suffolk, I think. So the boss has basically come up with an idea of a full capacity plan for events amidst the pandemic. And the gist of it is that it will basically be something that we discussed last week. It's a passport. Like you've been given a test, and you know that you've been cleared, and therefore you can come into the festival or the live music venue or the pub or whatever like that. I don't know what are your thoughts on that. It's a bit of a funny one.
That's quite radical thinking that you if you've had a test. So I get this right, just so I'm I'm kind of responding to something that I understand. So what they're suggesting is that you'd get a passport. You would go in and you'd prove that you've had a test, that you haven't got a coronavirus, you've got none of the symptoms. They'd give you a passport, and then you'd be allowed to go into Latitude Festival.
Basically, as part of the condition for entering, you have to have tested negative. However, the test isn't 100%.
No,
I think it's not even. No. I don't think it's even 90%.
No, and I think that's really interesting that that's how they've approached it. They've kind of tried to kind of carry on the liveness of the festival and trying to have people together and kind of, I suppose, they're creating a Latitude bubble. So that's what some people have done, haven't they? They've kind of created bubbles of children and families. I suppose that's what they're trying to do. I'm not so sure. I applaud them. I applaud their kind of thinking, their kind of radical kind of approach to it. But I worry about the test itself. I think the idea is brilliant. I think the test itself is where it could come unstuck.
I think it's the start of a conversation about it, isn't it? But it's whether they're allowed to do it. I don't know. What do you think, Nick?
Well, I'm struck by the weird idea that you could extend it. If you're going to have a relationship with somebody, they've got to be tested first for all sorts of things. Could be to do with anything transmittable, but it could also be quite useful to have a prospective partner tested, say, for mental health. And, why would they be choosing someone like me? But no, it's just a kind of weird world, isn't it, where it becomes the norm to get tested for stuff. And you could extend it, and I'm sure that there are countries and governments that would love to extend it.
I think that's the danger, isn't it? And I think that's what is worrying coming out of it. I mean, we've this tracking app, the government's tracking app that they've made. The amount of permissions that you need on your mobile phone for that is pretty scary. Like access to your entire contacts list.
Yeah. And so hang on a minute, if you're doing a track and trace, I should be able to give you the names of the people that I have been in touch with. You should not need access to my entire contacts list.
It's overreach.
Yeah. And it kind of makes you think, kind of immediately makes you think about, surveillance state and controls and Big Brother and it kind of pushes it in, makes you so suspicious, it pushes you away from it. Yeah. I haven't loaded it onto my phone because I just don't trust that the intentions behind it, if the intentions had been right to begin with, we would have had it 2 months ago.
Yeah.
Give it a month, work with your universities, bring private and public together. If we're going to, news-wise, I suppose, and kind of thinking about our, current government, I can't even begin to say our government because they've just handled this so badly, but I don't trust them. I don't trust the app. I don't trust them at all.
And I think that's going to be a problem for them because people aren't going to download it. If they'd have made it, if they'd been transparent and they'd said, this is the information we need, this is what we're going to do with it, you know, more people are likely to download it. However, this latitude thing, going back to that, the idea of a coronavirus passport means that it's almost luring people into needing to do it. And is it going to get to the point where, you know, you can't go in Morrison's unless you've had this test? And suddenly, everybody has to have it.
Yeah, some of that already exists. I mean, I can't go into a school without having DBS. Proof that I've not got any criminal convictions. So that sort of stuff exists. And the other side of it is track, test and trace is such a mess and so inefficient. When are they ever going to get round to looking at any other information about people? They're not going to.
Yeah.
The staff, they haven't got the capability to do it. They might get that information, but who is going to sift through it? Nobody.
Well, it's who it would go to. You know, it wouldn't go to the government itself. Wouldn't do it. It'd go to other agencies. I mean, you know, I think I would love to. I would absolutely love.
That happens already with Facebook and everybody else passing information on.
It's like
every time you shop online for something, half the world knows that you've bought it before you've even decided to buy it.
All you have to do is look at something, and then suddenly you're getting targeted ads.
It's true. Yeah, I think it's we're still at the beginning of figuring all this out. So it'd be interesting to see where we end up with it. Right, going to move on. So I think that this is kind of an opinion piece, really, but it's about will arts companies regret making so much content available for free? So obviously there's been a big switch to streaming things from all sorts of events, from live music venues, from opera houses. We were watching. My daughter's really into ballet, so we were watching a live stream from the Royal Opera House last night. I forget which ballet it was, but it was free. And traditionally, you know, we've never had so much free content. Where are we going to go from that when we actually start saying, you know, actually, guys, we need some kind of income stream from that? Would you mind chucking us a fiver, tenner?
I mean, some organisations are doing that already. Some smaller companies. I did a piece of work with Tamasha Theatre, video design work for a show that they did called Made in India. I think that was in 2018. And they're streaming that, and the stream itself is free, but it's a pay what you feel. So it's a donation, and then the money that is gathered from that is then distributed between the producing companies and the creative team. And
it works. It's sustainable, I guess, is the question.
I think that because then that's a choice, isn't it? It's like Slumdog Leeds would do shows, which is a pay what you feel, which then puts the onus on the person, you know, on the audience. So if they think, actually, I really enjoyed that, I want to pay £10 for it, great. You know, but I think it kind of then allows the audience to make that decision.
Yeah.
I think with the live stream, and I think NTW, National Theatre's done the same. I think there's other companies that are also doing the same, like Fleabag, Phoebe Waller-Bridge. She made that available and kind of has waived any money and any profits, and all of that money is going to charities that she thinks, that she's put forward. So I think companies are doing that, but I think that's a very valid question as to moving forward. Once we're out of lockdown, will we want to pay for live streams, like National Theatre live streams, going into a cinema to watch it? Will Shakespeare Company?
It's interesting. I mean, I think I've done pay-as-you-feel live events where people actually pay what they feel on the door, and it's just unpredictable.
Yeah,
that's the problem. I've had events where I've gone, my God, if I'd have charged £5 per head for this and the same amount of people will come, I would have had less money. You know, people overall on average donated more. And then I have events where it's completely full and there's nothing there. Nick, you've been doing a lot of events over the years. Did you do any kind of pay-as-you-feel style events? Or?
Yeah, and I've done busking and all that sort of thing. I busked poetry in Amsterdam and made money doing it. But more recently, I've been involved since lockdown with a thing called the World Storytelling Cafe, and I've been curating its poetry section where poets have been performing, and there's been like a collection box at the bottom of the performance page, so when you're watching the person, you can see there's a donations box underneath, and they can, via PayPal, give whatever they want. And I've done about 3 performances for it and made about £100. So not huge amount, but when I'm earning nothing, it's useful.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
do you think there's ever an element of devaluing something by saying that it's donation? It's an hard balance, isn't it? Because you're saying, if you can't afford to pay something, then we still want to make it accessible to you. But then equally, is it devaluing it by saying, well, actually, this is worth, this amount of money, and we'd like you to pay? I don't know.
It's a difficult one, but I mean, the thing is, you can't just sit there and go, pay first and then I'll perform.
No.
If you're going on the web and carrying on performing, you're doing it because you like performing anyway. But if there's the bonus of a chance of making some money out of it, great. And the other thing that surprised me is that I've got books and CDs out, and those have sold quite well by my website, simply because people are at home and get round to ordering stuff that they haven't.
I think because people are at home and we're kind of consuming content differently, where then artists are reaching audiences quite possibly they might not have through their normal channels. So I think it's done that as well. So I think your question is a really interesting one about that kind of making something pay as you feel. Are we devaluing it? And I would say not. I would say we're not devaluing it, because you'd kind of hope that those people because art is subjective. So someone's either going to love it and someone's going to hate it, or someone's kind of like, nah, either way. But you'd like to hope that those people who love it enough that they would pay something for it. But it is pay what they can afford as well as pay what you feel. That's a distinct.
Pay what you can afford. I like that. That is a much better way of saying it. I like
because
that.
Then it doesn't. The onus isn't. If you can't afford to pay, £20, you can afford to pay £5. But your feeling is that this is, this has had a real impact. I've really enjoyed it, or it's changed my thinking, or I've just had a wonderful hour. You want to pay more, but you can't afford to. So it's pay what you can afford rather than
if it's pay what you can afford, you can hit lucky by actually accidentally getting in your audience Trump or Gates or someone like that. Get them to pay what they can afford.
Just give us 0.5% of your earnings for the past month, and Mr. Gates.
I would actually do it as well. That would set us up for life, probably.
Yeah. I can't remember which country it is, a Scandinavian country, parking, speeding fines are based on a percentage of your income. And I've always quite liked that. So, it might be that you only actually get charged £5, but that's a significant amount of money for you. But if you're minted, £1,000 fine.
So rich Swedes go abroad to speed.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to statues. So, the knocking down of the sort of statues from colonials in the UK. This website is basically people marking where there's questionable statues around the UK, which sort of feels like a bit of an unusual one. Let's have a look what we've got here. I think, the Peel Park one there. So we'll talk about that a little bit. So it was a statue that got chucked in the river. Sorry, I need to check my notes here, don't I? In Bristol, that wasn't it? Yeah. And it was part of a system of mass murder, torture, and human suffering. So, I mean, I think that I guess this is a little bit of an opinion piece, isn't it? It has to be to a point. But the people had tried to go through democratic channels for decades to try to get that statue removed, and they couldn't do. So people took it into their own hands. Is that right? What do we think?
It's a moment, isn't it? I read Boris Johnson's response to it about history, and I don't agree at all, because history is living. And these are I've been having these conversations, for since the protest started. But a statue is commemorating and celebrating what somebody's done for an area, a city, a country. But if that achievement is questionable and is built on the backs of the suffering and oppression and suppression of others, then that's not something I would celebrate.
Absolutely not. And I think as well, the statues that you have in where you live tell people that are coming to that place what values you represent as well.
Yeah, but if you take history, museums are brilliant for preserving history, both questionable and celebratory. And that's what they're there for. Take the statue down, put it into a museum. No, talk about the fact that this man has had an impact in this area, and it's significant. But this is how this impact has happened. We've got a real issue in this country about our history and what we teach and what we choose not to teach, what we'll kind of relegate and never discuss. But what we do, what we should actually be talking about, and if we educated our children and our curriculum, our history curriculum reflected our truths, our uncomfortable truths. As a British person, I'm both the colonizer and the colonized. With my parents coming from South Asia, that in itself is a really interesting conversation. But understanding that intersectional place that people of my background find ourselves in. We have to discuss our uncomfortable truths. We have to accept our history, good and bad.
I think one of the problems is what's taught in history in schools. Like, it is so skimmed over. It's ridiculous. And I remember for a long time in my 20s thinking, why don't I know about that? That is crazy. And obviously I do my own personal reading about stuff, but there's things that get missed out. Like, went to Dublin and looked at some of the history there and was like, God, how do I know anything about that? Learning a journey as a child is just all the things, like you say. This is what countries do, though, isn't it? You only hear about the good stuff.
Yeah, and also you've got the thing of one person's hero is another person's villain. So it's always interesting when these unanswerable things come up, and this is one of them. Nobody in this country who's got really angry about the statue being taken down was shouting and screaming about history being ruined when they pulled down the statues of Saddam Hussein. They weren't using the same argument, which they could have done, against that and calling it vandalism. That was celebrated in this country by almost everybody. So it's not a black and white issue. It's not a right or wrong issue. It's an insoluble issue. That's quite good. It does good.
Yeah, it really made me think about the things we celebrate. Really made me think about what is it that are important to us. And I was talking to my daughter, and I said, attributes. We should be celebrating the things that matter to us, the things like kindness, generosity, honesty, integrity. We should put statues up about that kind of thing. We should think about that, the poetry that you're, Nick, that you're creating. People are putting music to it. They're creating, they're making more art through your art. Actually, shouldn't we be celebrating attributes and good, and human rights and, human behaviors that are decent, honest, good human behavior? And that would bring us together rather than pull us apart. And it feels like the rhetoric that we're in at the moment, it's further divisive, it's further about pulling us apart as opposed to bringing us together.
Definitely, yeah.
And all of us applaud if you're building statues to people. That we're all flawed. There are things about all of us where people could turn around, and I'd quite like to get famous enough to have a statue so that I could...
There's time yet, Nick. There's time yet.
Yeah, I could speculate who would bring it down and why. And I can think of family members who would.
If you think
they know me better.
If you think about the Angel of the North, nobody would topple the Angel of the North, because it's become a symbol. It's become, and of course, we know it's like, I often think about the brick man, that was proposed for Leeds, and I think, why didn't you? Because you argue about these things at the time, and you go, no, it'll be an eyesore. Why are you putting it there? What does it say about us? But now I think it's been universally, embraced.
And it's become part of people's identity as well.
Exactly, but where it started from, where it's come from, it's not about a celebration of one single person.
Yeah, it's more about value and sort of an ideal and ideas and things like that. I think that's totally true, isn't it? As soon as you put a statue up of an individual, you bring their flaws into it, and if I've got a statue of more of a sort of a representation of something, then it's a little bit of a easier rallying cry for everybody, isn't it?
It makes me think about our bid to become, City of Culture 2025 for Bradford. Mm-hmm. And it makes me think, actually, maybe that should be something we propose as a project, to say this city is going to create public monuments that are about attributes and ideas. Maybe that should be something that we actually put forward, because this kind of commemorating people, often, and you're absolutely right, Nick. We're humans, we're flawed, and that's okay to be flawed.
Yeah.
You and I can be. We're not running the country. We're not, politicians. And even our politicians, to some extent, we should accept that as humans, they make mistakes, and they come with baggage.
Yeah. Whereas if you could put a statue up of an idea,
yeah,
or an ideal or something like that, then yeah, it's easier to like not end up being in a mess with that, I guess, isn't it?
But they do exist. We've got monuments to war dead, and there are people who object to that now because they object to war, and we shouldn't glorify and memorize the fact that those people were victims. Whatever you erect like that, people are going to find fault with it. The Angel of the North, if we had religious fundamentalists in this country like we had centuries ago, they might object to us depicting an angel.
I think there's always going to be a diversity of opinion, isn't it? We're human. We're people.
Yeah, it's right. It's healthy. It's not a problem.
And I think we go with that. We accept that, and we go with that, because I can't remember the phrase exactly, but if you spend time trying to please everybody, you're never going to do anything. Nothing is going to get done. And while I kind of, I'm happy to kind of accept people's flaws and stuff, one thing I'm not happy to accept is incompetence, which is where I feel our government has totally incompetently handled this crisis. But if
I would happily topple a Boris statue or a Trump statue.
Okay, we're going to take a break. So I'm going to say a little word about our sponsors. If you guys need to sit down or turn around or something for 5 minutes, then feel free. So our first sponsor for today is Corner House Recording Studio. So that is a recording studio purpose-built. It's in Corner House. This is the Corner House Collective podcast, so they're part of the collective. It's run by Kurt Wood, and he's worked hard building, like I say, completely purpose-built from the ground up place that he can record live music, like live bands. And that's, I say live music, it is live. He specialises in being able to record a band in their totality altogether. In fact, he's just finished the final room, because the build, which is like an isolation booth, and he's all set up to go. Like tons of outboard equipment that you can use. He's really good to be able to go to with an idea. So if you've got an idea and you know what you want it to sound like, then he can help you get that. If you're not so much experience with that and you need a bit of help getting to where you want to do, he'll work with you like that. So that is Corner House Recording Studio. You should check them out, cornerhouserecordingstudio.com, and we thank them for their support in sponsoring this episode. Okay, we'll move on. Has Nick gone? Nick will be back in a minute. I've got a question for you then, Shanaz. So Can you tell us some about your recent works that you've done and the style, your style as an artist? And so you do quite a lot of projection based work.
I do quite a lot of projection. I work across theatre and public art.
Yeah.
And I do a lot of projection, and I like within kind of public art spaces and theatre. Equally, I like looking at things from a different perspective. I think everybody's very, very familiar now with projections on buildings and things.
Yeah.
And I remember, I think one of my favourite pieces, I think there's a couple of favourite pieces that I've done with Steve Manthorpe as Adept, which were, one was in Bradford, projecting down onto the mirror pool.
Yes. That looked awesome.
That was awesome, and I think that is going to stay with me forever, making that piece of work. But creating something for such a large space, but equally in the same, and because we were projecting down, but equally inviting audience to come into the water, so they're interrupting the projection. And I love that kind of disruption that audience can give to projection. And when you're projecting down and you invite them to do it, but there's also an element within that, like water, or steam, or and it's a safe element that with which you can actually interact with. That's one of my favorite things, and people there was a real joy and people wanting to go into it. So that's the kind of thing that I've kind of really stayed with me. And another piece of work that I really love, and this is a theatre piece actually, this isn't with Adept because all my theatre work is as me, as Shanaz Gulzar, and was a piece that I did as part of the Cultural Olympiad in 2012. And I created a design that was both projecting down and projecting up, because I loved it. So the ceiling, so that we created like ideally I would have loved to have a projection above all of the audience, or all the way around.
Okay.
But we didn't have enough space in order to do that. So in the end, we just covered the stage with it. But I love the idea, of the Sistine Chapel type of projection. So where you're looking up at something, but you're equally being able to look down, and it's like a sandwich.
Yeah,
I thought that opened up the space a bit more. And that's the kind of stuff I'm interested in. I'm interested in unusual perspectives. I'm interested in and that's throughout my work. That's through projection. It's through some of the kind of augmented reality stuff that I'm beginning to play with a lot more, having done something for National Theatre Wales in 2018. And kind of really looking at film as well.
Yeah.
So, you asked me at the beginning of this, how has my work shifted? And I think I pudged the question a bit by saying, I think I'm going to know more when I come out. But we always tend not to give the time we have for reflection when we're kind of starting the work that we start and the play that we start to do. Because I'm playing with that stuff at the moment. I'm not kind of making work as such. I'm playing with different ways of making work. I'm kind of beginning to learn new skills. That I think is going to impact what work I'm going to do next.
It's a process, isn't it, I suppose? And I think sometimes you need to get something out of the way before you can move on to the next thing. I'm not talking that as a creative, because to be honest, I'm more of a like a facilitator, if you like. But I see people do it, artists of all sorts. It's like they have to. It's almost not quite, but it's almost linear that they have to go along this path and complete this step before they can move on to the next one. And it's wonderful sometimes to see people progress that way, like. From people just starting out to people that have been doing it for much longer, but it does seem to work that way.
I think one of the things that I've really enjoyed last year was a really good year because I did, because I had really interesting, very diverse work. I produced projects for Manchester International Festival, really massive, big projects with artists from all over the world. I produced music gigs. I worked on documentaries as in front of camera, when normally I'm back behind the camera. So that was a real kind of shift of kind of relating kind of with the audience, kind of thinking about talking directly to the audience as me, as opposed to through the artwork.
You did the walking on the BBC programme that I've not got around to watching yet. Sorry, that was completely different.
But I also did the hidden portraits of Bradford documentary about Dolby Studios, and that I absolutely loved that, making that program, because it really kind of helped me kind of play with things that I the things that are the most passionate that I'm most passionate about, which is photography, image. Oh yeah, that's a mock-up of the piece. That's not the actual piece.
That's not the real thing.
That's not the real. Yeah, you see the towers and things. That's just a mock-up. But then I think with the hidden portraits, which is still available on BBC iPlayer now, I didn't realise it. Put it back up again, but it is. It's photography. It's history. You cannot get rid of that history because the photographs demonstrate the immigration into Bradford. You see it. You see the Ukrainian community. You see the Caribbean community. You see the South Asian community. People from Bangladesh, Pakistan, India, and it shows, what Bradford, has not absorbed, what Bradford has kind of welcomed, or and kind of has created, I suppose, where we are today. So that I really enjoyed that. But then the piece that I did in my hometown as part of a festival last year, where I projected onto the gable end of a building from Town Hall Square. That was really lovely to be able to show something that I know I could just take my parents to, my nieces and nephew to. They're not going to have to go to London or another country, or
That was part of the Keighley Arts and Film Festival.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
And that was a piece that Steve and I did together as a depth, and I really enjoyed trying to tell a story through animation. And that was learning a new skill. I did animation on my iPad. I really enjoyed that. There's something really lovely about doing something at home.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think all very well you're going off to London and do it. They've got loads of that stuff. We need more in Keighley, please, and Bradford. So. So it's interesting to see. Right, look, I'm going to get Callum into the conversation. Callum, if you want to join us, he is going to sing us some songs today. How are you doing, Callum?
Right, can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can hear you good.
Wait a second, I need to whack my headphones on.
Callum's just in the middle of the street, by the looks, next to some random brick wall, looking good.
On Abbey Road, apparently.
Is it Abbey Road? Oh, okay, there we go. Okay, so we'll let you introduce the song you want to do, and then we'll chat some more after that. Yeah.
Cool. So this first one, it's on an EP I brought out probably about last February, I think it was. This one's called Nothing But Strangers. We were reckless, we were runaways, we were two lost souls, we were renegades. We were falling like paper planes in the rain. I was reefer, you were cocaine, I'm a real live wire, naked flame. We were helpless, oh, but when we touched, we burned. Like a beat up stolen car, we were burning out. Oh girl, were we crazy to think this would work somehow? Oh, was it over before we figured it out? Oh girl, we were something but nothing but strangers now. I was working, you were miles away, living on just a phone call on Saturdays. Were we foolish to think we just stay the same? We were crashing, coming to an end. Oh, and by November we were barely friends. Then you packed up, checked up, moved to the outside of town. Like a beat up stolen car, we were burning out. Oh girl, were we crazy to think this would work somehow? Oh, was it over before we figured it out? Oh girl, we were something, we're nothing but strangers now. Oh, we were something. Oh, we were something. Oh, we were something. Like a beat up stolen car, we were burning out. Oh girl, were we crazy to think this would work somehow? Oh, was it over before we figured it out? Oh, girl, we were something, but we're nothing but strangers now. Oh, girl, we were something, but we're nothing but strangers now.
All right, thank you very much.
Cheers, man. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to
It's gone
unmute
weird on
everyone
my
now.
phone. Yeah. Oh, there we go. I think it was me that did it.
Don't worry. These things tend to sort themselves out in the
Yeah.
in the mix or whatever. So how are you doing, Callum? Are you well?
Yeah, this has been really interesting. I've been watching the whole time. It's fun.
Have you? Good.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us.
It's nice to actually be involved, like talking to some other people other than my immediate
Yeah.
household for a change.
Yeah, this is it, isn't it? When we started doing this podcast, I've been doing it with Danny Hardaker, and the first time we saw each other, we'd not really seen anybody but our family for two and a half months, and we both looked at each other and was like, hello. So I'm going to ask you that question, though, that we've been asking everybody. If everything went back to normal tomorrow, has the pandemic changed the way that you approach work? Are you going to find that you're going to go back to it in a different way? Do you approach things in a different way?
Well, a lot of my work is kind of based around performing live. So I think the kind of answer is, at the moment, for a lot of musicians, I'm sure some other people say that we don't really know. Like I've got a few tours booked, and we were in the middle of a tour when the whole lockdown situation happened. And obviously, all like 90% of our living and what we do is getting a crowd together, and like you can't get like 700 people in a room anymore for a while, at least. Like but so it's not so much of a problem for my shows, because there's not 700 people at them. But like for the tour
Soon.
supports, yeah, let's hope so.
The
But
one
for me-
that there was a venue, Hangar 18, I think they were called, that basically published their showed what it would look like if they went reopened with social distancing, and I think their capacity went from 370 to 30.
yeah,
So
and it's just not. It's whether you'd. I know as an artist, it'd be weird to do that. Like the last gig I played was at Stylus Student Union in Leeds, and it was a busy gig. I was supporting another band, and I think there was probably about 700 or 800 people there, and it felt weird. Like it felt there was a kind of general unease about the whole situation anyway, which kind of, the gig was still fine, but I think it was on everyone's mind.
yeah,
And
yeah,
if someone
definitely.
coughed, then it was just awkward, you know. Like, and so it's how quickly we can kind of get back
Do you know,
to the.
when we were going into the lockdown, we cancelled 2 gigs before leading up to it, and I think our last event in the Exchange was 2 weeks before the lockdown, and then and talking to the staff, you know, and we were like, this doesn't feel right, you know, and we don't feel like we've been given any guidance that we should be doing it. And then Boris Johnson started saying, don't go to pubs. We're not going to shut them, but don't go to pubs. Do you know what I mean?
It was really weird, man. Like, because like we had on that tour, we had 2 dates left, and we had like 3 days off in between that gig that I was just talking about, and then we were meant to be down south doing Brighton and London. And I was it was a similar position, like you were saying. Like, I was thinking, well, is it moral to be now getting on a train and going down and playing to this crowd? Is it? And thankfully, like, they kind of made that decision the day before I had to. Like, but in that, like, when you're working with promoters and stuff, and the promoters planning on going ahead with it, as an artist, it's quite tricky to then turn around and go, well, actually,
we're not happy doing it. Absolutely.
I want to work again. So it's weird.
I remember somebody saying at the beginning of it that it was a really odd combination of feeling like you were overreacting and like you were underreacting at the same time, which doesn't make sense, but that's kind of the feeling.
Exactly. And you get, I think there was different views on it depending on who you spoke to and how up to date on watching the news you were. Like, I know a few of my mates that musicians, like, especially the ones that were on tour that hadn't been really watching anything. It was kind of like, it's fine, it's all right. And I'd been sat at home for a few days watching it. I was like, well, actually, it's not really.
This isn't okay. Yeah.
I was working on a big show that was a music and theatre piece. It's Riz Ahmed, The Long Goodbye, and we were just about to go into tech on the Monday. It is that thing. Michael, you're absolutely right. You kind of think it feels like I'm overreacting whilst equally underreacting at the same time.
Well, that's what happens when you don't have clear guidance on something, I think, from the government, isn't it? Don't particularly want to go into heavily partisan politics here, but here we are. So, Nick, I wanted to talk to you.
Now let's go into the heavy partisan politics. Love it.
So, you're a prolific promoter. I've got an old flyer from you that I absolutely loved. Your flyer style back there, all handwritten, and I think about how we do ours for the exchange and think maybe I should just get out the pens or get somebody who can properly draw and to get out the pens like that.
I hand did those myself simply because I couldn't afford typesetting.
Yeah. and you did events at the Fun House in Keighley?
Yeah, I was just a sec. I was going to show you the very first one. There you are.
Oh, is that the very first one?
Yeah.
Business and Sisters of Mercy. There you go, yeah.
The Business were controversial. They were a skinhead band. They had a weird mixture themselves. Their singer, who's dead now, had supported the National Front. Their bass player was really left wing and a union leader. So they represented the cross section of working class in London, and I got them to come up and do a gig just to kick it off. But yeah, Sisters of Mercy after that. With Seething Wells, who's now sadly no longer with us, but was a poet friend of mine, and the March Violets, who went on to be successful. After that, I put on Sudden Death Cult, who later became The Cult, and the other half of them. Anyway, it was an interesting time to put on bands, and it was fun.
That was going to be my questions. Like, what the pandemic aside and venues not being able to open aside, what differences do you find back then of the way that the way that live music worked in terms of the way that the public perceived it compared to now? Do you think has it become more saturated, or is it, has people's opinions on it changed? What have you seen change?
I think the time when I was running the gigs, first off, I started because I had a lot of friends who were punks, skinheads, that sort of thing, and there were no venues for them. I was older than most of them. I was in my late 20s when I started doing this, and it was just putting on stuff for kids that weren't allowed in pubs, weren't allowed into clubs because of what they looked like or because they were too young or whatever. And as soon as I started doing it, we got big crowds turning up, and it was great. And then at the same time, there was indie music starting up. People were releasing stuff on their own labels. There were really good independent labels and distribution and a lot of shops. And loads of people wanted bands to come to this area that they'd heard of. And so it spread from me just doing punk and skinhead stuff to a whole load of indie bands really quickly. So I mean, for example, Sisters of Mercy weren't particularly a punk or a skinhead band. They were an indie band from the outset. So it was blending all of that stuff, and there were so many interesting bands to put on, and people willing to come and see them. And I could because the crowds were reasonable size. I could do the gigs really cheaply, so I was charging like £1.50, £2 to get into a gig to see 3, 4, 5 bands. It was a great time to be doing it. I just loved doing it. For a long while, I didn't make money out of it. Then I started getting paid by venues to do it. Yeah. So it actually became a living for me as well, which was good because it meant that I could carry on doing it. But I did that for years and years, and then moved into alternative cabaret as well. And I working with a guy, again gone now, Willie Beckett. We put on alternative cabaret right at the start of alternative cabaret. We were some of the first. So I mean, Steve Coogan gigged for us for £5.
Wow.
You know, and we put on loads and loads of really well-established comedians. Now, another one, about 30 people turned up at a pub to see the Crisis Twins, a pub in Bradford called Tumblers on Tumbling Hill Street.
I remember Tumblers.
They came up from London, the Crisis Twins, and they said, we'll bring you a package if you give us about 80 quid. So we give them 80 quid, and they brought up a compere and to support comedians. And they were Joe Brand and Jack D doing their first ever gigs outside of London.
Wow.
So you know, that's what I mean. It was the same with the bands. You could put on really exciting bands, and there was me, and in Leeds also John Keenan doing stuff like that. John's carried on as a promoter, but it's just an interesting time. And I mean, you asked about now. I think now is an interesting time as well. I mean, especially post-pandemic, so many people will have been being creative and have the frustration of not having got that stuff out the way they wanted to live in front of an audience. So that, you know, hopefully we'll get some sort of cure. Hopefully we'll get it so it's safer for people being closer together. Hopefully that's not too far away. And then there'll be an absolute explosion, I think.
That's an exciting thought.
Yeah.
And you know, that hopefully that does happen. I think these things do tend to come in waves of, you know, like cohesive scenes and kind of people being inspired by creativity. It does come in waves, I think.
Yeah,
and
but in lockdown, I mean, so many people are writing books, so many people are writing plays, so many people are creating stuff that they want to get out there. I think it's going to be astonishing when we actually manage to see what's been produced. Yeah. I mean, I started out doing these one poem a day.
Well, we're going to ask you to do that. Would you like to read us one of your poems? It can be whichever one you want. I know.
I've got here a few of the early ones that I wrote at lockdown.
It seems to have been a theme of our spoken word sections of people's feelings of what going into the lockdown and the feelings of the pandemic are. So, and you've done an entire series of them. 84?
89 now.
89?
I think tonight's is either the 89th or the 90th. I can't remember.
I mean, listen to this, but read Nick's Facebook. His poems that he does every day are amazing. But yeah, Nick, read us something.
Okay. I'll do a positive one just to cheer people up, because a lot of mine are negative, obviously, because it's a negative experience. But here you are. Be positive, be keener. Fewer planes are flying now. This planet's getting greener. Fewer cars are on the roads. The air is getting cleaner. Pubs are shut. We're drinking less. Already we've grown leaner. On water, coffee, cocoa, tea, orange juice, Ribena. At least we're trapped in this place, not Halifax or Hena. We're nicer to each other in everyday demeanour. Way things are, we wash a lot, which makes us much hygiener. And we're both stuck at home where we too can get obscener. That's it. Cheerful one.
Lovely. Thank you. I've just muted everybody. Let me unmute you. Here we go. Okay, so we're going to do... We've kind of still got stuff to talk about, but running out of time. So I'm not going to... I don't really care if we run over a bit. Unless you have to go, you have to go, and that's absolutely fine. But we do have another advert to do. So I'm going to do a quick word from our other sponsor, if I can get this up. So before I do it, I'm going to just talk about these adverts and the context of them. So we've been given like some... we were given a bit of money from the Bradford Council... crisis fund to basically start this podcast, and I've always kind of wanted to have a go at doing it, so I said, oh well, let's do that, and we got the grant, which was great, and that's timed as over 5 episodes. I want to try and make it sustainable, so that's the thing, to try and make it so that we can carry it on, because I quite enjoy doing it. So the first 2 sponsors are Cornhouse Recording Studio and Danny Hardaker Video, but we would like more. So if you're interested, I mean, we don't get absolutely big, we've got bigger numbers than I thought we were going to get, but we don't get absolutely loads. But if you're interested in sponsoring, then do, drop us a email to send it to michael@musiciancentre.com or drop us a message or whatever. But I'd like our adverts to be endorsements, so things that I know that I've worked for that are positive and that I think can help other people, and help other people in the creative realms. So yeah, thanks to Danny Hardaker Video, who's sponsored the podcast. So Danny's a videographer. He can do anything visual that you need that moves. He's a great guy to work with, and he does lots of work for live music things, community-based things, events. He's got a lot of different kind of aspects that he can do. There's lots of things that he's done for music videos. You can see that's the light show in it. I think Fox's Fur before there as well. And he's done quite a lot of work for councils. He's done a lot of work for Keighley Arts Festival. He did the run for that, and there's all sorts of different things that you can do, and he's a really nice guy, easy to work with. That's one of the things, I keep saying this, but I think it's important to reiterate: freelancers, you need to be able to get on with them, and you need to be able to communicate what you want to get from the project, whether it's like an advert or what. He's done lots of different things for me personally, for my businesses. So check him out. It's Danny Hardaker Video. Give him a search and hit him up, because he is the man if you want that kind of creative video vision. Right. Okay. Moving on then. So I had a couple more links. One of them was about you can nominate an endangered Victorian building that you think is worth saving. And I think this is a nationwide thing. This is from the TNA website. So it's the Victorian Society, and they're basically asking for people to tell us which abandoned but derelict Victorian buildings do you think are, going to be demolished and do you think shouldn't be. So I wanted to I'll ask you, Callum, what's your favourite kind of building around these areas that you think that isn't used? And, let's face it, we've got quite a few of kind of old beautiful buildings that should be saved.
In terms of the actual, I don't know that much about kind of what's technically Victorian and what's
No, me
not.
neither. It's fine. We'll talk about whatever building.
We did some. There's a bar in, is it Cross Flats or technically? I don't know. A bar called Hullabaloo.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Just
Shipley.
above there. Yeah, Shipley. Yeah, it was Shipley. Yeah, it was. Yeah. And above there, there's like this. The bar's like perfectly modern and stuff. And then we were doing a shoot upstairs in this kind of room, and it was like probably the most sketchy, dangerous room you could possibly work in. It was like this old Victorian kind of dance hall.
Oh, really?
A viewing gallery. So the downstairs, it was kind of obviously used as like just a storeroom for the bar.
Amazing. It used to be the Connection in Shipley.
Yes. Yeah.
I used to go there as a kid.
Yeah, and it's not been. It's just there's some pictures on stuff of like my Facebook and stuff, like the area, but it was just, I just remember thinking like we kind of went in and there was like.
I need to check that out.
Yeah, like if you can, I don't know. Obviously, it's not really open to the public. I wouldn't have thought, but like in terms of preservation, like of that kind of stuff,
I've always had this sort of half dream thing of wanting to restore a revolving stage. So in the old Mecca Bingo halls, what they used to do is they used to have a stage that the band would be playing, and they weren't really plugged into anything, and it was a dance band, so people were dancing and everything, and the dancing could not stop. So what they used to do is the other band used to set up behind them, and then some poor guy underneath would have a crank handle, and the band playing would be like, we're in the key of E minor, and the other band would carry on, and this guy underneath would turn around, and the band would carry on playing. And these hundreds of these stages, all boxed in old Mecca Bingo halls, that, they're probably not safe anymore. But I'd love to restore one, and amazing to see. Nick? Victorian or any kind of old building that you think is going to rack and ruin that you'd like to save?
Well, very obviously in Bradford, there's the Gaumont, the Odeon in Bradford, which is where I saw the Rolling Stones back in 1973 or 63 or 64, right? There's also the library in Shipley.
Yes.
That's I've recently seen pictures of the inside of that falling to bits, and that could still be rescued, and it should be.
The Carnegie Library at the bottom of Carl Lane.
Fabulous old building, fabulous. But it's a real mess inside, but you could rescue that. I was involved in rescuing the old mill at the top of Church Bank. That did get restored, so occasionally things get rescued. Other things that you were asking me about running gigs. A couple of venues where I worked. The Spotted House is an extraordinary old farm building. Under the stage there, where we used to put on the bands, is a swimming pool, an entire swimming pool underneath.
This is the Carnegie Library I'm just showing here because I found them pictures as well.
Yeah, that's it.
And
what an extraordinary building!
It looks amazing. I went in there when I was 4 because my mum was telling me. I don't remember, but yeah, it's kind of sort of beautiful but incredibly sad, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
See things like that.
Yeah, but it could be so. And one more building that's gone now, but the Royal Standard. But when I used to put gigs on in the Royal Standard back in the 80s, on the top floor were dog fighting and cockfighting pens.
Wow!
That had been left there. They'd been used up from Victorian times up until the 50s, and they were still there. There were still feathers and bits of fur on the floor.
Oh.
But more extraordinary, and it's still there, is under the pub. There's another building there now. I think it's called Sovereign or something like that. But anyway, underneath is about a mile of air raid shelter tunnels that we were going to open up and have an event in, but then the pub closed down. But about a mile of tunnels, and they were left exactly as they were during the war. There are still coats hanging up there. There are still all the sand buckets with woodbines stubbed out in them and things like that. Still a whole lot of the tools and things that were just left at the end of the war, sealed in. And I got to walk round on one night with the guy who was the manager of the pub. Just having a look at the tunnels, and they were perfect, and they must still be there, about a mile, and they were air raid shelters.
Shanaz, buildings that you would like to save in the local area?
I mean, I think like Nick, the obvious one is the Odeon, because I, as a student doing my foundation course at Bradford College, I went with a good friend and saw East is East. That was the first time I saw East in that cinema. And I remember I used to just love the fact that I could just walk out of college, finish a session, and then I could go watch a movie because it was at the bottom of the road. There's something to be said for cinemas being in cities rather than as, being shopping malls or you have to drive to them, park up and then go. This felt right. But the thing that I kind of, buildings that it's never the grand ones for me. It's all the, the dwellings that are kind of falling apart.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, I've found some pictures of Bradford Odeon and where we're at with it, so I'll just bang some of them up now. I think this is them.
We could see actually. But for me, it's the old dwellings that the shelters that look like they're falling to pieces. But once upon a time, people used to live there, and they can be in the middle of a field, or they're in, but you can. There's something about that kind of human footprint that I really like. So it's not about grand buildings or historic buildings, but it's about human dwellings.
There's an amazing ruin by Five Rise Locks. I don't know what it is, actually, or what it used to be. It must have been some kind of farmhouse. But that's fascinating. And obviously one of the walls is completely off and there's no roof on it. But there's history there and there's what happened here. And, you question what went on, and I guess it's definitely interesting that we've got all these places around us, I guess, with the history, and it's a shame to. Obviously, it's very, very expensive to. It's much cheaper to knock a building down and rebuild it, but it's not obviously about that, is it?
That's always the argument. That's always the argument. That's always the argument that you can't. It's going to cost much, much more to repair this and to make it livable or usable. I mean, the one that burnt down, Drummond Mill.
Mm-hmm.
That was an extraordinary building, absolutely extraordinary building. My dad was so upset because he was a mill worker when he first came to this country. His first job was at Salts Mill, and he was so upset about Drummond Mill because his words were that was one of the most beautiful mills.
Yeah.
So he was really upset about that when that happened. But again, you know, when they had the show that was held in there by Freedom Studios, you actually got to see it, and you could actually still smell the wool in there. It was brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
I think that's the thing. It's culturally expensive to knock them down. That's the thing, isn't it? It costs a little bit of us and a little bit of who we are, I think, when them buildings go. It's probably an entire other podcast, to be honest. Look, I could talk to you guys all day. I've really, really enjoyed this. I think we do need to wrap it up. But thank you very much, all of you, for coming on. I genuinely would just like to talk to you all day. But we are going to have to wrap things up. And Callum's going to help us do this. Are you going to finish us off with a song, Callum?
Absolutely. Yeah. This is a tune I actually wrote during lockdown. I've got a girlfriend that lives in Spain, which I'm sure you can imagine is far from ideal at the moment. So this is kind of, it's not so much just about that, but that's kind of the thought process behind it. This is like starting from the second verse, so we don't run out of time. Best laid plans are made for change. Take some time to work it out. But we got space for rearranging. We're only letting go for now. We'll take each day a little slower and appreciate the small. Hold our friends a little closer. Learn to let go of it all. So darling, keep your head up, don't you miss me. It'll only be a little while. Only call me up and I'll be listening, no matter who you're with or where you are. I'm only by the phone, even when you're on your own. You're with me everywhere I go. So hold on till I hold you, and I'll see you in October, when all of this is over. Cheers. Yeah.
Thank you, that was lovely.
Oh, thank you. Cheers. Yeah. Oh, has he gone? Has he walked away? Has he had enough?
No.
Is it that bad?
Oh, hang on a minute. Hang on.
Are you frozen?
No, hang on.
In a corner.
Hang on. I don't know what's happened.
Great music. Great music. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, mate. Cheers.
Oh, here I am.
There you
I'm on
are.
my backup camera because it's gone. Weird. So, Callum, where can we find out about you? What's your website, address, and all that?
I think most of the stuff is on my Instagram. So that's just Callum Spencer _, I believe. But if you just type in Callum Spencer into Instagram, it should hopefully come up.
Thank you, Callum.
It's all on Spotify as well, if you type in my name.
Lovely. And Nick, where can we find details of your books and CDs?
I've got a website, It's, what is it? www.nicktoczek.com, but you have to spell Nick Toczek correctly.
Look at
You
it
could
on
go
your
to
screen.
Facebook. You could go to Facebook and find me as well.
Do read Nick's.
There are two Nick Toczeks.
No way.
So make sure you get the right one. We're friends.
Right one. No, oh yeah. But read Nick's poems every day. I'm assuming you're going to continue doing them.
Yeah.
Good. And Shanaz, where can we find out more details about yourself?
Two websites: www.adeptprojects.com and www.shanazgulzar.com.
Lovely, thank you. Well, thank you genuinely, all of you. I've really enjoyed this podcast, and I could easily go on for another couple of hours, but you would probably get bored. And thank you to our sponsors for this podcast, Cornerhouse Recording Studio and Danny Hardaker Video. That's episode 5 done. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Cheers.
Cheers.